Today we're going to be talking about the trademark dispute drama between metal amp brand Fortin and boutique pedal builder Analog Music Company. Apologies if I sound a little bit strange today, I am feeling a bit under the weather. Trademark disputes happen across all different industries and they tend to be rather nuanced and boring. But whenever this type of thing happens in the guitar world, there tends to be a lot of hype surrounding the story. People pick sides, one side is often heard much more than the other, but not today. Today I'm going to do my best to present both sides of the story. This story starts around 14 years ago when guitar player Jason Frankhauser took his Marshall 97 reissue of the 1959 Marshall SLP to Mike Fortin to be heavily modded. It had the Fortin Hulk mod, custom transformers, a full clean channel added to it, among other things. It was practically a rebuild of a very different amp than what it originally started as. The amp itself had an orange Tolex shell, and after the work it was named the Evil Pumpkin, probably due to it being orange and sounding very heavy. But anyway, over the years, this amplifier became well known among Fortin amp fans. And at NAMM 2020, 10 or so years after the original amp was modified, Fortin announced a production run of the Fortin Evil Pumpkin amplifier. It was going to be Jason's signature amplifier, and it was going to be based off the original Evil Pumpkin modified Marshall.
Alright, so what do we got here? Let's explain the Evil Pumpkin. Yes. New for 2020?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, though it was announced at NAMM 2020, with that year being a write-off for most production for most industries, and with a further complication of difficulty sourcing components, these amplifiers are still yet to go into full production.
Okay, now let's jump over to the other party in this story, Analog Music Company, a one-man operation based in Ukraine. He received an email from a lawyer representing Fortin, and he shared it on Instagram. Here's what it said.
I'm an attorney for Fortin Amplification, who owns the Evil Pumpkin trademark in the United States. Their trademark is for computer software for operating musical instrument amplifiers that may be downloaded from a global computer network. Downloadable software, namely software plugins in the nature of modeling parameters for emulating, simulating, and modeling the sounds of musical instrument amplifiers, guitar amplifiers, power amplifiers, preamplifiers, speaker enclosure, this bit's in bold, electronic effects pedals for use with sound amplifiers, electronic effects pedals for use with musical instruments, sound effects pedals for musical instruments. I noticed that your Evil Pumpkin pedals have been sold in the USA. I'm sure that you are unaware of this trademark registration, so I would like to kindly ask you to stop using the name Evil Pumpkin for your pedals, as it's infringing on the above referenced trademarks. Please let me know if you'll be changing the name of your pedals. I see you're living in Ukraine and I wish you well, stay safe.
Now AMC responded to this with 4 points.
1. We used the Evil Pumpkin name publicly and commercially before you filed for registration, and we have proof of that.
This is true. I have personally seen the sales receipt of the first sale made, and it was made in January of 2020, whereas Fortin's application for the US trademark happened in early February 2020. With that said though, application date isn't always the deciding factor in these types of cases.
2. We are based in Ukraine and selling from Ukraine. So these products come to the US and are sold there by third parties.
Now this is where the story starts to get a little bit more complex, and we will be returning to this point in Fortin's statement. What I can add is that I personally asked AMC if he had US dealers representing his products, and he said,
"We have just agreed with 2 companies to have our pedals, 2 units per each company, and it is not for the Evil Pumpkin, but for the SHSL filters. 3. We are holding the trademark protection of the Evil Pumpkin in Ukraine."
That's a strong point.
4. Finally, current productions are called the Evil Pumpkin Gazala from permission of Reed Gazala, so it's not a direct match even.
The thing is, it doesn't actually have to be an exact match. If you made a pedal called the Les Paul Gazala, I can't imagine it would be too long before Gibson made themselves known. But anyway, after this Instagram post, many people who saw what was happening and weren't impressed started to voice their disapproval of this in Fortin's comments on social media. This resulted in Fortin outright turning the comments off. Probably wasn't the best move to make though, because without a public statement or any statement whatsoever acknowledging it, it kind of made it look like they were burying their head in the sand and waiting for it to all blow over. It probably didn't help that certain supposed to be trusted sources were not reporting factually. I'm looking squarely at you, Guitar.com. That headline is factually incorrect. In fact, it's not just in the headline, it's also in the article. there was no threat. There was a request, but there was no threat. The actual headline reads a lot tamer, coming from Guitar World, who reported on it accurately, which was, they asked. There was no threat. Now, like I said in the beginning, these types of disputes are often very nuanced, and there's always two sides to the story. So in an effort to present both sides, I contacted Fortin and asked if they had any comment to share on the situation, and they presented me with a very detailed response, which I'm going to read now. Also, at the time of recording at least, this is a world exclusive. No one has got a statement from Fortin yet, so that's why you should subscribe.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak about this situation. As always, I know your assessment of the matter will be presented in a fair and balanced way. The last thing we ever want to do is get involved in a social media pile-on that is so very common these days. Unfortunately, we have already experienced a huge amount of negativity across our social media platforms because of this situation. We responded to a post AMC made on Instagram dated January 15, 2023, where AMC states, quote, "I am also working to make pumpkins available with our dealers in the UK and USA." End quote. We have seen listings on Reverb.com for the pedal, for example from AMC themselves. If you also check the AMC payment and returns conditions, it clearly states that AMC have, and continue to do so, shipped direct to the USA. Obviously, as we have a current trademark logged on the name Evil Pumpkin in the USA, this sent up a red flag, and we requested to know if AMC will be changing the name of their pedal.
Alright, I'm going to stop it there because there's a lot to unpack, and then we'll continue the statement. I think there's some compelling arguments made so far. The post Fortin reference, the one they say initiated this whole thing, is real. AMC did publicly state that they were trying to get their pumpkins stocked by dealers in the US. And while it can be said that hasn't happened yet, I don't think it's completely out of bounds for Fortin to query this attempt, especially if they've got the trademark and defending that is part of keeping that trademark. The thing is, when it comes to selling on Reverb, it could be seen as a bit of a grey area. AMC could argue that he's selling his products in Ukraine. Now, certain customers might reside in the US, but they're paying for shipping and they're importing, not him. However, with Fortin having the trademark in the US, it wouldn't be particularly hard for them to get a court injunction to allow customs to seize any trademark infringing goods that are being imported. They haven't done that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they could. There are a lot of grey areas throughout this whole thing. Nothing is cut and dry. Let's continue with the statement.
AMC responded stating they do not sell in the USA, and if anyone did, it would be third parties and not AMC themselves. Obviously, this contradicts the statement made by AMC on the post made on the 15th of January, and subsequently their own Reverb payments and returns conditions. The name Evil Pumpkin has been in use for many years across a full spectrum of products and industries, but none of them are in the musical instrument industry, let alone the electric guitar subsection. And we feel that there is a possibility that confusion could arise between the two products should they be sold in the USA.
Now there's two things to expand on here. The first is confusion. They kinda have to mention that. It's a big part of trademark law in the US. Do I personally see the potential for a lot of confusion between the two current products? No, they're very different. With that said though, Fortin's trademark does cover guitar pedals, and it wouldn't be a crazy idea to think that they may have an Evil Pumpkin preamp pedal planned somewhere in the future, and if that was released and if that was planned, then I would be much more convinced by the customer confusion argument, because they'd be a lot more similar. The other part I'd like to expand on, and what I think might just be AMC's best defense, is that Fortin's trademark covers pedals for guitar, effects pedals for use with amplifiers and such, but technically the Evil Pumpkin Gazala isn't a pedal. Now it used to be, but it's not being sold as one anymore. It obviously started life as a Boss DS1 pedal, but it's now being sold after the modifications as a synthesizer/noise machine. It's being referred to even as a tabletop instrument on the website. And that description might just hold some water, because there are videos of the product being used as a theremin. Now theremins are classed as musical instruments, so if this product is one too, it might not fall under Fortin's trademark that covers pedals. Of course, it's a massive grey area because It was once a pedal, and it still can technically be used as one with an electric guitar. They're not recommending it, they recommend it being used as a tabletop instrument, but it still can be used with a guitar. Sorry for the interjection, back to the statement.
One of the main arguments put forward was the fact AMC had been using the name Evil Pumpkin before we registered the mark. But to be honest, it would be improbable that AMC used it before us, as we have been using it for over 10 years, as seen in this video, uploaded to the Killer Tone YouTube channel on August 7th, 2012, which can clearly be identified as a Fortin Evil Pumpkin. We have not requested anything untoward or unreasonable, we only feel that it would be better if there could be no confusion between the two products in the US market. It is unfortunate that it has come to this, as it appears to be the latest situation where the internet has acted as judge, jury and executioner. We have nothing but strong support for small boutique companies who are trying to find their way in an industry that is already extremely crowded.
So how do I conclude? I'm not really sure I see a winner here. You know, Fortin have already taken a hit reputationally. AMC, understandably, really don't want to change the name of a product that they've built their reputation with. With that said, they wouldn't have to change it outright on all of it, just the US models. But they still, understandably, don't want to have to do that. There are a lot of variables, and it's to the point where if this went to a court, I have no clue who would win. But in saying that, business is business, and trademarks are part of that business, as is defending those trademarks. And Fortin could have been a lot more aggressive than they were. They did just request for a name change. There was no threat, there was no change it or else. There was no threat of further litigation. It was just a request at this point. But when I saw the news break initially, I was thinking, what are Fortin doing? This doesn't make sense. But with their statement, I think they've justified their position rather well. Still, like I said, no one's really winning here, and I would much rather see this dispute handled amicably and not in a courtroom. So that's the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.